Are you one of the millions of people that's scared to death of public speaking? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is public speaking expert teacher Glickstein. And it all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and we're on UK Health Radio all weekend long. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, it is the interview portion of our show, and today we're going to talk about public speaking. I'm delighted to bring a new guest on the show, Glickstein. He is the founder of the Speaking Circles International and is an authority on leadership presence and magnetism in public speaking, and really about making a one-on-one connection with the entire audience. It's a subject I'm really interested in because so many people have problems with public speaking, and there's a lot of different schools of thought. Now, Lee is the author of Be Heard Now, End Your Fear of Public Speaking Forever. He's got a new book I'm holding up right here for our watchers of the show, viewers, Be Seen Now. It's the new one. It's just coming out now. And Lee is the recipient of the Athena Award for Excellent in Coaching and Mentoring. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he does his work globally and on Zoom, so we can set the information up for everybody out there. So if you want to contact Lee and take his courses, you'll be able to do that. So let's bring on to our show the one and only Lee Glickstein. How are you, Lee?
Good, thank you, Robert. Good to be here.
Well, I'm excited because having worked in advertising, I had to do a lot of presentations, and on the marketing side of the business also, I had to do a lot of presentations over my career. And I found that the number one thing I learned was you have to be prepared. I always felt if I knew my material, I would do a good job, and everything else, I wasn't the greatest speaker, but I was authentic, got the information across. But so many people get up there and they start winging it, or they get super nervous. And I wasn't nervous unless I didn't know my material. But what I want to know is, tell us about why you wrote this new book, Be Seen Now, and then get into your kind of a background, because I know you, Lee, you had anxiety about public speaking also.
I had the world's worst. I don't like to be competitive, but I had the world's worst stage fright until I was almost 50 years old.
Wow.
And I went to Toastmasters and flunked out, which is kind of a joke because nobody flunks out at Toastmasters. But I couldn't fake it till I'd make it. And I had to figure out a way, because I had something in me to express something. I wanted to be a comedian. I wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to be funny. I wanted to be smart. But in front of groups, I lost everything. And all the other ways of getting over stage fright by tips, tricks, techniques didn't work. So I had to invent a way. And I realized what I discovered, my epiphany, because I thought I had a block in speaking, but the epiphany is that the block was in receiving available listening. That in any group there is available listening, and receiving that listening is what gives you the opportunity to relax and take it easy. So that's why when I do my groups, the first instruction in my speaking circles is to the listeners. To be right there, to create a greenhouse for the person up front to not even have to speak, but to practice being with one person at a time. And when I started doing that, and people started doing that, speaking, it became a fresh approach to speaking. I don't think anybody has taught the idea of being with one person at a time and seeing that person so they feel seen. That's kind of tricky, right? How do you see people so they feel seen? Well, it's not a common practice. We tend not to really see, even in one-on-one conversations, we're not really seeing that person so they feel seen. In an audience, if you see one person at a time, even if you see somebody for 3 seconds, you really see them, that creates it's almost the soul of the room comes together. They feel the community in it when you see them. And even if there's 1,000 people, you hear that singers, they uh, people who make a living singing, like Liza Minnelli, Tony Bennett, that people at the end of a concert say it was like they were singing right to me
Hmm.
because they were connecting with the people they were seeing. So that's my way of making speaking into the approach. You said relational presence is that it's shifting the approach of a speaker from speaking to an audience to being with them.
Hmm. Let me just butt in for a second, Lee. I want everybody to know that you call this is kind of your signature relational presence. That's what this is called.
Yes, relational presence. And the
Relational.
reason I call it relational presence is when you study presence spiritually or as an actor, it's about being yourself. It's all what you're presenting. Relational presence is being present relationally. So we're present together
Mhm.
rather than my presence is sweeping the room up. It's like
Well, let me let
I'm
me ask
allowing.
let me ask you a question, Lee. So when I was taught, you of course you want to look around if you're making a presentation and just check out. You got to get a feel for the room. But then once you're speaking, if it's a large group, kind of look in the back, like past everybody, through everybody, so you don't have to. And then every once in a while, maybe when there's a pause or whatever, you can look around a little bit, but don't get caught locking eyes with too many people because you can get distracted. How does your practice work in terms of actually taking the theory and putting it into practice? Take us
Yeah,
through
well,
like what somebody does when they get up on stage. Then how do they do
okay.
that? How do you make that connection when you have so many people out there?
Well, the first thing you do before you say a word, and hardly any speakers do this, is you're introduced, you get up, take a full breath, or even two or three, but at least a full breath and start looking around. And it's not locking eyes. That's where the issue comes in.
Mm-hmm.
You can't lock eyes with somebody who's not locking back. I don't even say connect with people because you can't connect with someone if they're not connecting with you. The idea is to have your eyes available for connection. You're inviting connection. It's a soft gaze. We know this gaze in nature. We know this gaze in speaking to a little baby, but but in speaking to an audience, that soft gaze. So I would say not. You don't look. I've heard these tips and tricks, right?
Sure.
You look
Mhm.
at the back,
Right.
look at the back, look at various places.
Right.
No, there are people out there. Notice a face. Notice a face. If you look at somebody and they're giving you and you don't like what you're saying, they're giving you a bad look in some way, don't judge them. Go to somebody else. And what you'll find is that if you be with one person at a time, seeing them so they feel seen, that after a while, the audience as a whole feels seen. So, yeah, no tricks, just
Mm-hmm.
the human connection all over the room
So if
coming
you
at you.
So if you're, let's say, presenting to a group of people, 100 or 100 plus, you make some eye contact, you move around the room a little bit while you're presenting and taking those pauses. Some people glare at you and some people make you feel welcome. How
Mhm.
do you kind of time that so you don't get distracted? Because that's like both sides of your brain working at the same time.
Well, that's right. It is distracting. And that's why most people, in order to get to that place of comfort in front of an audience, they need to practice systematically, whether they come to one of my speaking circles or they can get some friends together. In my book, I talk about how you can do this work on your own just by a few guidelines. So that's why they need practice because at first, even really good professional speakers who just want to be more magnetic, uh, they come into a speaking circle, and the first thing they see is they're scared because they're no longer covering up with performance and gestures and memorizing and getting it. They come to a speaking circle and say there's somebody else at the circle has never spoken publicly and they're scared out of their minds. The person who's scared, the public speaker will get up and they have work to do to come down to where the real connection is, which they haven't necessarily had. That's why they're not at their peak magnetism. And so they'll, if they are willing to go to beginner's mind, they will see a whole new way of being with audiences. Whereas then the person who's scared gets up and, maybe they look and say, just stay with me as a facilitator in the back, just stay with me. Go with somebody else. You don't have to speak. And often what's going to happen is they're going to start to speak about what's going on for them that nobody's ever asked in the moment when they're scared. And when they talk about it, and what's going to happen is that the professional speaker is going to learn more from the scared newcomer than vice versa. Because we're all at an even level when it comes to true connection. There's no we can all do that, being exactly who we are, as long as there's no pressure to perform. So I make sure that there's no pressure. When there's no pressure to perform, we can perform well in a way.
Most people feel, though, that there is pressure. If they're getting up in front of a group, they feel an accountability, a responsibility. How do you guide them to process that so they don't put too much pressure on themselves? They enjoy the moment, if you will.
Well, let's say somebody comes to 10 speaking circles or the equivalent of that in their life. They can get 9 other people or they get some other people to play. After a few circles if the facilitator is holding them to the standard, which is, okay, stop, breathe, be with someone. And they keep practicing that and starting to notice that when they do that, they start to speak extemporaneously from the heart or from the soul or whatever you want to say. And after, say, 10 circles, when they go out to the world, or the quote real world, though I'd say my circles are the real world, they go out to the real world, they take that with them. It's the same. I say audiences are audiences. When you can know how to have a relationship with an audience, every audience is in this. You can have a relationship with any audience. So they'll tell me, I finally got up in front of a real audience, and immediately I went into my speaking circle pace. Mm-hmm. And it's often a slower pace than what they might ordinarily speak. That isn't to say that sometimes when they're up there in this pace, they can go faster because it's a natural it's a natural relational thing that happens. So you become yourself in a big way is all I want people to do, is be who you are and let yourself expand your presence. Let your presence expand to fill the room.
So that should integrate into whatever the content is that they are delivering. So in other words, the real person becomes the deliverer of the message in a more authentic, likable way than somebody just canned up there, just putting content out.
Yes, absolutely. You could do the same talk in relational presence or in I don't want to knock Toastmasters, but in Toastmasters presence or in technical presence, the same talk, and it's 2 different talks because the audience is involved in the first.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Lee Glickstein, my special guest on Guys Radio. He's got a new book here. It's called Be Seen Now, Inspiring Insights into Being a Fearless Speaker. This is your second book. How does this differ from Be Heard Now and your fear of public speaking?
I wrote Be Heard Now about 25 years ago. Be Heard Now, yeah, about 25 years ago. And in the intermittent time, I turned out all these articles for my monthly newsletter, which when COVID hit became a weekly newsletter. So I had a few hundred articles that were that got deeper into the feel of this work, into ways of looking at it from scientific, because the miracle of brain neuroplasty is something new about how we actually rewire our brains. Like I came into the world, or when I was young, I was wired. My brain, because of my family and trauma, I was wired to in front of groups to contract and be and anxiety. That's how I was wired. And as I did this work in my 40s, I discovered this work in my 40s, my late 40s. And because of all the practice, when I see a group now, when I'm in front of a group, I expand and I'm not anxious.
Mhm.
It's like and that's in my brain. That's why I don't have to think, what's my technique? How do I do it? I'm just wired now to be have more presence in front of large groups.
Mhm. What was it, Lee? What was your kind of aha moment where you had the epiphany to say, "Oh, I've got a new way of doing this, and this is how I can help people and
Well,
and yourself, of course, too."
yeah. Well, it was what I mentioned before that I tried so hard to break out of my problem, out of my block, my block about speaking,
Hmm.
which I had one on one too. And I started to do, I started to get friends together and do this work. And at some point, I just realized, oh, the problem is that there is no such thing as public speaking. It's only private speaking
Hmm. I love it.
with one person at a time. And to do private speaking, if you're speaking to a friend and you're saying something rich and deep and important or telling a story, you can tell if your friend, if you could you want to see your friend. You're not talking at somebody. You're looking at them so you feel them getting it. And I realized my problem was that I had not noticed that I was not good at noticing the person I was talking to in real
Hmm.
life on stage. I'm not noticing you. I'm just doing my thing. I said, "Oh, public speaking is about allowing the listening because people want to listen if you give them someone who's there for them."
Hmm.
So that was an epiphany. And that's when when I started talking about that, my group started to flourish. And it took me about 3 years before I subjected myself because I still was afraid. And when I finally got up, I remember there was a circle I did, and there were some spaces, and someone said, "Lee, why don't you get up?" And boom, I got that same feeling that a lot of people get when they come to their first circle. But I did, I got up, and I went through the process myself after teaching it for 3 years. Isn't that strange?
Amazing. So, for the lay person, then, what are some of the things they need to do before to make those, with the soft eyes and the connection? I know you have a whole process with the relational presence. What are some of the elements there to get the person ready so they can make that, be able to be in a position to receive when they get on the stage in front of people?
Well, two things are breathing and use of eyes, full breaths in between making a point. Notice when you come to the end of a sentence, there's a little breath. Find another person. And then the idea of the soft eyes, people have to learn, be trained in soft eyes, a soft, steady gaze of kind regard. So everybody in the speaking circle room, all the group, well, they're breathing and they're providing soft eyes. and you're up there and you're meeting their soft eyes. Now, granted, you go into a real life audience, you don't have that kind of support, but you do it in a room that has a support, like a greenhouse where you can grow. And you can go out into the world and bring what you learned in the group. This is like, you come from a good family and you go out, you come from a family that's not dysfunctional, if there are any groups, any families like that. You can go into the world and be brave or be bold when you get support for who you are. So what you're doing in speaking circles is getting is like a regazed. You're learning how to use how you would want to have used your eyes with your family, how you would have received what I call the mother mirroring, which children need, whether it's coming from a man or a woman, the mother mirroring. If we didn't get that, we learn it in this group. But it's not like we say, okay, now we're going to do mother mirroring. It's that as you do the protocol, that's what's happening. And you're getting the father gaze. The father gaze is, you can do anything. You can do anything. And the mother gaze is more like, I'm totally supportive of you. And in a group that becomes a kind of a family very quickly, because there's no small talk at all. It's just, people get up for the first minute, say, and they just check in and how you doing. But so you're getting back what you didn't get from your family. So then you can go in, when you do that enough, you go into the world and you have that in you. That's how your neural pathways have been new neural pathways have been created. And it's funny, people come to the class and they do really great, and then they'll come back the next week and say, I'm afraid again. Like they think they have to go back to square one. And I say, no, you just found yourself on the old neural pathways are still there. We never lose that anxiety. I still have that neural pathway in me that I could go into anxiety. And all you want to do is move to move to the freeway that you've been learning. And the way you get to the freeway that bypasses the old wiring, you breathe and you gaze and you go back onto the new road that you're developing.
It's absolutely amazing. My special guest on Guys Radio, Lee Glickstein. We're talking about the new book, Be Seen Now. I've got to think two things. One is this practice becomes kind of muscle memory, like putting or hitting a baseball or whatever. And so after a while, when you get up there, you're already doing this because it's been kind of pre-programmed by what you talk about, the neuroplasticity. And it sounds like also people need to do a little bit of shadow work or whatever, go back to their childhood. Maybe it's a self-hypnosis, like a parts therapy or whatever, and figure out kind of what's been getting in their way. Because most people, we're our own worst enemies at times. We get in the way of ourselves. And sometimes we forget to be our true selves. And really, things are all about discovering who we really are, not trying to be somebody that we're not. But we lose track of who we are over time. And it sounds like your methodology helps people get back to who they really are. And that's a real positive, because that can have benefits that transcend just public speaking and just how day to day, how you deal with other people. Is that correct, Lee?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, Robert, muscle memory, and there was something else you said that I was gonna
like self-hypnosis.
Oh yeah, no, that the shadow work. No wonder I forgot it, because who wants to think about shadow work? The shadow work. And the great thing about when you get in a group like speaking circles, and you're after a while, like come to 3, 4, 5, 6 circles, and you're up there and you're breathing. I don't cue people to talk about what's the trauma, what happened, what happened that you created this fear, but in their own time, they'll start talking about those things. They'll say, "Oh, I had a crush on a girl, and I couldn't look at her, and I couldn't speak to her," or something that happened at home, something or in school where they got scared. So that these things will come out in the course. I will not ever try to get people to do this.
Right.
But in their own time, they see this is the safest place. I've got a lot of therapists who come to these, and that's where they get to talk about things that they only get to listen to.
What's something that so people go through the training, they get up there in front of an audience, and I've got to think there's something, one or two things that they still have to always come back to learn how to. When this happens, I have to do this. There's another hurdle that pops up that they weren't ready for, that is systematic and part of the learning and then experiencing and putting forth your message.
Yes, there's a particular one, and it's about, I call it easygoing in the not knowing. You're coming to the end of a sentence, say, you're up there and you're coming to the end of the sentence, and you realize you're not sure what you're going to say next. Right. Or you're starting to come to the end of the sentence and and this happens in circles. The first time a person gets up, perhaps they're talking about, well, I'm here because of this. And then they forget, they don't know what they're going to say. And I say, okay, stop and breathe. And what we're looking for is what I call being easygoing in the not knowing. So the thing is, when you're up in front of the room and you don't know what you're going to say next, instead of doing this, you're bringing the sense of, I don't know and I don't care. And you breathe and you look around. And again, if you've done some circles, something will come, but what will come will be more relational. It's going to be content that might be more interesting, more important. Being easygoing, that's what you have to remember, is when you start to get tight, stop. And what will happen is sometimes people will come and say, your pauses were wonderful. And I don't mean just pause. I mean, say you stop and you take 30 seconds looking around. As long as you're not projecting, I don't know what to say, as long as you're
right.
As long as you're going back to, oh, these are beautiful people. Oh my goodness. That is the huge thing you can remember to do.
Yeah, the power of the pause. I always think of Obama in terms of really knowing how to work that pause, right?
And was he working it, or was he just allowing himself to exist without having to give?
Now, how would you compare, just an aside here, so he was considered and is considered a very eloquent speaker, effective speaker, and I think he knows how to obviously manage the relational presence very well. Then you've got a guy like Trump, who's a lot more direct, and his speaking style seems to be a little bit different than it was when he first ran for president, became president. Now he seems to, I don't know if he's using the teleprompter or whatever, but seems a little more articulate and specific. He's not quite as all over the place since he's been in office the second time. How do you compare those two? And they're both effective in their own ways, because there's an authenticity in both of those guys.
Yeah. Well, I don't find myself judging Trump as a speaker. I'm judging him for other reasons.
Right.
So I couldn't comment on as a speaker. He's probably, in terms of the response he gets, he's probably one of the great speakers of all time. But what's the message? I'm interested in are you making a better world or not?
Got it. Whole different subject. We won't go there. Let's talk about, there's 7 aspects to the relational presence. If you want to highlight a couple of those that are the most important.
Well, the gaze and the breathing. I almost have to look at my list.
Well, take a pause.
Thank you. I got to see my list. Back to the old
While
wiring.
you're looking, I always find that, it's interesting. I got interviewed the other day by one of my former producers, and we're doing a show about aging. And after the show, he said, "Wow, well, it was tough to ask the questions because I was umming and awing the whole time." And I told him, "Good, welcome to the club. It's easier to answer the questions if you are prepared than it is sometimes to ask the questions." Do you find any truth to that, Lee?
That it's easier
To be on the receiving end of an interview than to be, in other words, easier to be in your position than my position. Because I
yeah,
find myself every once in a while, I'm like, where did my energy freezes?
right.
Like, depends on who the guest is,
Yeah,
because there is an exchange of energy. And
yeah,
sometimes I'm like, what's my next question? Because you want to actively listen and you want to stick to kind of directionally stick to your script.
right.
So it becomes tricky.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
advise people in that area at all?
Well, I advise people who get interviewed. I like
Mm,
getting interviewed is much easier, much more comfortable. And I do work with people who get interviewed like by a panel of people that come up. There'll be three people in the
mhm, mhm,
business,
mhm.
and they're being interviewed, and they freeze. And I tell them, well, for one thing, this is an important thing to tell a story,
Mhm.
to tell a quick story about yourself, but to also, of course, when somebody asks a question, don't answer it right away. Look at the person, take a breath, acknowledge them, like, oh, thank you for the question, or maybe just, and then answer. Take your time. Yeah, I worked with a guy who was um, an expert witness in
Mhm.
cases
Mhm.
about economic witness. So he would, in a case where somebody got injured, how much money are they losing? How much should the award be? How much should the jury award them? And he was very well known. He got a lot of work. And he said what his trick was, he would wait after a question was asked, and he'd answer very briefly, exactly to answer the question instead of going on. And he said, as a result, he didn't spend that much time on the stand because he just did that. He said, and he got that. He credited speaking circles with giving him that comfort.
Mhm. Amazing. Talk to us a little bit about how people can practice mirror work and things like that to get
Oh,
prepared. Because I think that's
this
really something, because this is something that our listeners and viewers can do at home on their own.
this is thank you for bringing it up, Robert, because if you're watching or listening, want to practice, and it would be great to have a partner. In my book, after each essay, I have about 120 pieces. There's an exercise you could do with your partner who wants to do this work, or in the mirror.
Mhm.
Now, any of you can go to the mirror in the bathroom, or better yet, a handheld mirror,
Right.
and just
Most
allow
people
the
don't like to go and look in the mirror, right?
they do. But fear of looking in the mirror is greater than the fear
Because
of
in
speaking.
your book, you talk about, you can see your, grandfather or something in there. You have a whole bunch of techniques. Sorry for
Yeah,
interrupting, but I found it
no,
so
that's all
fascinating.
right. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. I found my friend in the mirror. After my whole
Mhm.
life, I would only use it to preen or to shave and suddenly with this mirror work, I can look in the mirror and say, "Hi, buddy." So
I love it.
take a minute, see yourself, and the first thing you might have is all these judgments,
Of course.
right? Judgments. Okay, have the judgments. Finds find look really see. Well, anyway, there's these exercises. Well, no, I'm trying to give you out there an exercise.
Mhm.
Just a minute a day. Try to come to terms with yourself. See your friend in the mirror. Close your eyes and imagine you met an old friend of yours on the street and you just saw them. Give yourself that kind of hello.
Mhm.
And then uh, when you can be with yourself for even 30 seconds, speak to yourself. How are you doing in there? What's new? When you have a decision to make, go to your mirror. I have this chapter on be your own consultant, be your own therapist. So mirror is a great place to start. You're not embarrassing yourself in front of anybody else. So any embarrassment you feel, is something you need to work through. It's just there. So yeah, the mirror is a wonderful, wonderful way to get going in this work.
And I think,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. I guess it could help in any area of your life. I think part of that self-love, that people don't want to look at themselves because sometimes deep down, subconsciously, they might be embarrassed about who they are. They don't really like who they are, and they have one idea of who they are in their head, and when they see the person in the mirror, they're like,
Right.
there's
Yes.
a lot going on there when you look in the mirror.
A lot going on. You could, yeah, you could see your whole life in front of you,
Right.
and I'm so sad that people give up, and then they never get to be the friend. I mean, I see a friend in the mirror. I want
Fantastic.
everybody to see a friend in the mirror, their best friend.
Now, I want to get to one area where I think is really important because we've changed the way we communicate and do business in a lot of ways. We're on Zoom right now doing our interview, and so many business meetings happen. And I think people actually communicate differently on Zoom. Whereas if you're with a group of people, let's say you're with a group of friends, they're four friends, you talk over each other, everybody's interrupting, saying side comments and all of this, and it's fine. It's organic. It bubbles. That cooks. That's how the way it works. When you're on Zoom, it's like you go, now this person goes, now this person goes, now this person goes. There's not a lot of crosstalk. Is that true? And how do we manage that in terms of your technique, Lee?
Well, that is a feature, Robert, of Zoom speaking circles. Is that it's being with one person at a time. So one person talks at a time. On Zoom, it works brilliantly. I didn't realize when COVID came and I started to do Zoom, I thought, this is just a stopgap thing for a few months, right? Turned out to be a few years, and I'm still doing Zoom calls because I can have people from all over the world and all over the country. And in a Zoom speaking circle, it's exactly one person at a time having a turn. And we figured out the eyes, because how do you make eye contact on Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is say there's six people on the screen, two rows of three in gallery view, and you have a 6-minute turn. What you do is you call a name. So if I was taking a turn, I'd say, Robert, and when you hear your name, you look into the camera.
Got it.
So I look at you on the screen and I'm having actual eye contact.
How do they manage this, Lee? Because when we're talking on Zoom, I'm looking at you on the screen, but then I'm also looking at the green dot for the camera.
Right.
How does somebody manage that properly? Because if
Well,
you're looking at the green dot, you're communicating, you're still staring at a green dot, whereas I'm looking at you, now I'm looking at you on film, but I'm not looking at the green dot.
Well, you say staring at the green dot, but when you practice, this was the miracle. When you practice, you look at the green dot only when your name is called as a listener. And that's only for about 15, 20 seconds because they move on to another listener. If they take too long, I'll point, meaning, okay, move on to someone else. So you're at the listening post for this 15 seconds.
Got it.
And what happens is this green dot, or I just have a black dot on my camera. When I look into it, when I'm called to listen and I hear the person, it's like hearing them on the phone. You can have intimate conversations on the phone. I know you're hearing them on the phone and they have your eyes. And because when other people are giving you their eyes, you feel it. You're happy. You're happy to provide your eyes. So people get into the habit on Zoom. They call names unobtrusively. That's I said Robert or Lee. That's not like Lee, and we don't talk about their background, what's behind them. We don't talk about them personally. We're just utilizing their eyes. So that's how Zoom becomes it becomes a benefit rather than a bug.
Well, fantastic. You're doing great work, Lee, and I'm fascinated. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to talk to you separately or email or whatever, and maybe I can take part in some of your classes, and then you'll come back on the show and we'll do it again and talk about what I've learned.
I would love to have you at a Zoom circle. That would be a perfect opportunity.
We'll do it. So the name of the book is Be Seen Now, inspiring insights into being a fearless speaker. I think this is something everybody needs to learn. I really like the fresh technique that Lee has and the compassion and passion for it. It's really great. Tell everybody where they can find more about you, Lee, quickly, and we'll do it again.
My website is speakingcirclesinternational.com. And my email is lee@speakingcircles.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. Pleasure to meet you. And we're going to do this. So hang on. And after the show, we'll talk about it a little bit. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week to Guys Guys TV and Guys Guys Radio, please support us by subscribing to our channels and platforms. Thank you.